Okay, so now that we have found our after repair value, we're going to take that and work backwards to cut out all of our costs associated with buying and selling the property. So we need to factor in all of our costs that we're going to incur to get our maximum allowable offer. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for how much can we offer? What is our maximum allowable offer? What's the most we can pay to buy this property and still make a decent profit for us? Okay. So after repair value, if you remember, 122,481.74. We talk to the seller and say, hey, you know, how much you want to buy it? And they always say, well, how much you want to get for it? Say, hey, you know what? Go back and forth. Say, you know, I can. Depends on the repairs. Depends on this. Depends on that. And you finally get them to say, hey, okay. I said, what's your lowest price you can offer? And then they'll say a number, and then you say, oh, well, is that the best you can do? You know, and then you keep going till finally they give you a number. Y'all settle. You know, he says, okay, the best I can do is 85,000. Which is not what we're going to offer, but that's the best he can do. The best he can do is 85,000. So we're going to see if the best they can do fits our criteria, and we make an offer on the house. So after repair value 122,481, their asking price 85,000, and I cut out a whole bunch of negotiations and all that stuff, and we can talk about that in a later video. But we're just found the asking price. We discovered what their real asking price is. Okay, so rehab is 10,000. So you know, we're going to estimate, but of course during our contract period, we're going to bring in 3 contractors and get a bid. But for now, we're going to say rehab is 10,000. We talk to the seller and say, hey, when's the last time you updated the house? Can I come see it? Well, whatever. Okay. So you go see the house if you want to, or you can just estimate and then renegotiate after the option period, or during the option period is a tactic that a lot of investors use. Okay, so we've got we determine asking price 85,000. Rehab is about 10,000. So a light rehab, we have to determine holding costs, right? So the holding costs include utilities, insurance, property taxes, HOA, lawn maintenance fee, anything else you have to pay a charge for while you're holding the property. It also includes lending costs, but we'll have that separate in this whole section for lending costs. But for now, we're talking about utilities, insurance, property taxes, HOA. I didn't put lawn care maintenance, but down here in Dallas, there's lawn care. Maybe up north there might be, you know, snow removal or whatever, but you definitely need to put that stuff into consideration. But for this example, we just got those 4. So the holding costs determine on the number of months you're going to hold the property. You know, so we're going to say that we're going to hold the property for 6 months because we have a light rehab, or assuming light rehab, and if this changes during the option period, we're going to change these numbers and go back to the seller and say, look, renegotiate, whatever. But let's just, for this example, in this example, it'll take, we'll say 2 months to rehab it, 60 days, since it's 10,000. It shouldn't take 60 days, but 60 days. And then another 2 or 3, 4 months to sit on the market, right? But the market's hot right now in Dallas, and so there's no reason why for a $123,000 house that this thing flies off the market, you know, if done properly. So, but we're going to give it another month or 2. So we're going to say 6 months. Okay, we always have to estimate high so we don't get killed, right? So utilities, we're going to say for this small house it's $200 a month. It is the summertime, it could be wintertime, whatever. We're just going to say, but you know, we can ask the seller, hey, how much do you pay for utilities, right? Water, heat, this, that, right? And he says $200 a month. I'm like, all right. And during the option period, you want to see those bills too, if you have a reason to disbelieve. But $200, so we're going to hold it for 6 months, $1,200. Insurance, down here, I don't know if nationwide or whatever, but you get a $900 policy for a 6 months period. Pretty good. So $900, and the minimum amount that you can get here is 6 month policy. I don't know if that's a national thing or whatever, but that's what we get. So that's what we know. Property taxes, we'll just look on. We're not going to guess. We're going to look on the CAD, right, and the Central Appraisal District of that county, and it will tell you all the property taxes, and it'll tell you what the estimate for next year is, or this year, whatever. So we're going to say we looked on the CAD, 2,200, so we're holding it 6 months, $1,100. HOA, some houses have it, some houses don't, right? Homeowners Association fees. We're going to say that this is $900 a year, so that's $450, right? Cut in two. So the total holding cost, if you add those four numbers up, $36.50. Okay. Buying closing costs, we got to pay. You know, we're paying all the costs, right? To when we buy it, right? So we're going to say that 2% of ask. Okay. So about $1,700. It's different for each, depending on the price of the house and stuff. And right now I'm buying a house for $47,500, and it's going to cost me about $15,000-$16,000. But just estimate 2% of ask. But what you really do is you call after you get this thing under contract, you know, you call before you call the title company and say, hey, look, how much is this thing going to cost to close, right? So $1,700. You really need to call them, but for this purpose, we'll say that. Selling closing costs, how much you're going to sell it for, how much it costs for the realtor and the selling, closing, right? 7% of ARV, just estimate, $85.73, okay? So here's where this is a variable. Lending costs, very variable right now. Depends on the kind of money, right? If you got the money, you don't count that, right? So you have the advantage if you got cash sitting around, right? Or want to invest. I mean, whatever your financial condition, if you can throw down, you know, $95,000, you know, to a house, which you really don't want to do, but we'll talk about leverage and stuff in a separate video. But right now, the most expensive money is hard money. It's called hard money. It's not because it's hard to get. It's pretty fairly simple, straightforward to get, because there's a lot of hard money lenders just crawling all over the place, and they are companies which lend money. A lot of them base it on I guess I can do a whole nother video on this, but real quick, they base it on mostly on the asset, but also your credit as well. So depending on who you call, depending on the lender, they will give you the criteria. And when you're calling them, asking them, hey, what do you base this off? They'll ask you, you know, several questions. How many flips have you done? 0, whatever, 1, 2, 3. Do you have good credit? They can run your credit. So depending on this right here, it's a whole nother conversation. But for now, we'll just say that the going rate, and this is pretty accurate. The going rate is 3 points, 14%. Some will mostly they'll lend up to 65% of ARV, so you are going to have to put in some money. If you got private money, you know, depends on what you negotiate. I mean, it's very variable. So that can change, right? I mean, so for this illustration here, we're going to say that the lending costs, the points are 3 points, which would be, well, a point is 1% of the total cost, right? And you pay that maybe sometimes up front, sometimes on the back end, depending on the lender. Lending costs, we say 3 points. Earlier, like I said, 1 point is 1% of the entire loan amount. Okay, so The loan amount in this scenario, we're just going to say asking plus rehab, 95,000. So 3 points, 2850. Okay, interest rate, 14%. That would be 13,300 divided by 2, since we're only holding it for 6 months. 6650. And you also got to ask the lender, you know, what are your fees, man? You know, oh, we just charge 3 points and 14%, and they sometimes will say plus fees, and say, okay, what are your fees? In this particular instance, $1,000 for fees for, you know, whatever the bullcrap fees, you know, I mean, handling fees, you know, paper processing fee, you know, depends on the lender. I've seen the big lender down here, I'm not going to mention, but I mean, they put some fees on you. But I mean, if the deal works with the hard money lender, fees, points, and interest, then it works. I mean, you pay what you pay, and if it works out, you get the money. I mean, you're not using your own money mostly. But hedge means oops, I messed up, or I didn't think of this, or that's your slippage factor. It's money that, you know, because on rehabs, you always spend more than you think. So usually, if it's a light rehab, I do 1% of ARV, which we put here, 1225. If it's a heavy rehab, 10% of the rehab costs. I mean, because rehab is going to eat your butt sometimes. That's why you get three GC quotes, and to protect yourself, but we can talk about that later. The profit, right? The big deal, right? How much you want to make, you know? Make at least, I mean, to do all this work, you know, take, you know, we say 6 months, but you're not working fully for 6 months. It might take, you know, a month, or, you know, 40 hours maybe, you know, whatever, if you driving around and making calls and doing this and that. Even probably not that much, but you want to make, I mean, I want to make at least 20 grand, you know. So you take your base ARV minus rehab, minus your holding costs, minus your closing buying, minus your selling closing, minus, okay, so you take minus the holding costs, minus the buying closing costs, minus the selling closing costs, minus your lending costs, minus your hedge oops factor cost, minus your profit, and can you see that right there? The MAO, Maximum Allowable Offer, 66,832. In this scenario here, it's obviously going to change depending on what other factors are involved, and depending on the house that you're trying to buy mostly, right? I mean, because of the ARV, right? ARV repairs, number 2, big time repairs, and then number 3, the money costs. Those are the 3 biggest costs. So he wants to sell it for 85. Your maximum is 66. You say, hey, most I can pay is 65,000, and 64,000, 63,000. And he's like, man, I can't do that. I'm like, well, I understand it's probably, you know, I don't want to insult you or anything, but with all the costs that are involved, that's about as much as I can do. And then they sometimes come back and they say, well, what's the best you can do? I say, you know, the best I can do is 65,000, you know. And they're like, you know, sometimes you never know. Sometimes they take it, sometimes they don't. If they don't, next, right? You never go above your maximum allowable offer unless you want to cut into your profit. You know, if you're hard up, you need some money now, 15,000. I don't know, man. You're not gonna make too much money off that, but it's up to you, right? It's up to you. But anyway, that is how you find the maximum allowable offer. Okay. I hope that was helpful. Let's see here. So back to Valencia's questions. How do you know what to offer on properties? That's how you know. Also, after you drive for dollars, how do you locate the owners? Okay, locating the owners.